Interested in crime and justice? Wondering what it's like to be in life-endangering situations and have to defend yourself with lethal force? Want to know about loyalty and corruption? Well, you've come to the right place. Come walk in the mind of a man possessed by justice. Welcome to Northern Vibe. Thank you very much for tuning in. If we've never met, I'm Matthew Maloney, host and founder of Northern Vibe. Northern Vibe believes in elevating the obscure, exposing excellence, cultivating curiosity, acknowledging achievement, and shining a light on uniqueness. We engage in open conversations with those who have hidden talents, abilities, and who have accomplished a bit. And let me tell you, the chap I'm speaking to today has accomplished a lot. We seek to understand interesting and informed people, to comprehend and appreciate motivation. So listen in, eavesdrop. Everybody wants to grow. Northern Vibe is growing, but we really need your help to keep up momentum. So please like and share, follow Northern Vibe if you haven't already done so. We're getting some really interesting locations about where people are speaking from. So tell us where you're from. And looking at the metrics, a big hello to Toowoomba. We're getting some great suggestions from the comments page, so please keep them coming. And if you've got any questions or you want to make any comments tonight, put them on. This includes suggestions for guests. So if you know someone that you want to see on Northern Vibe, or you yourself are interested in coming on Northern Vibe, contact me through the Facebook page. Now, I'll be doing a really brief bio for Bluey, but first, we always do a mention in dispatches. And what that is about is a charity that's chosen by the guest. Now, this week's charity is Blue Hope. Now, here is the webpage. So it's bluehope.org.au. It's got one of the Get Involved. It's got one of the Get Involved tab there. So if you want to know how you can help that out, jump on in. You can raise funds, you can volunteer, you can partner with them. Blue Hope are an excellent organisation. They assist police officers, especially for PTSD related stuff. And the other thing I'm going to do is, and Bluey doesn't know about this, but I'm going to do a bit of a plug for his son, Shawnee O'Gorman, who is now he's got his own consultancy firm. So it's called the Strong Life Project. Sorry about this, Blue. I know you kind of didn't know. I don't, but Sean's got the Strong Life program. It's an excellent program. He's working as a consultant, and it talks about how it's kind of life coaching, how to overcome difficulties, all that sort of stuff. I've heard him speak. He's really, really good. So I got to say, it's an unashamed plug. I do plug Shawnee right there. Now, about Bluey O'Gorman. John Bluey O'Gorman was raised in Brisbane. He was one of 15 children raised in a Catholic family, which includes 2 police officers, 2 lawyers, and 3 nuns. He's a decorated police officer. He holds an Australian Bravery Medal. The military equivalent of that would be the DSM, the Distinguished Service Medal. That's one below the Victoria Cross. He's got 2 Queen's Commendations for brave conduct. He served disproportionately in the CIB and retired as a commissioned officer. I can tell you from personal experience, he's a lunatic driver. He's happy to run towards people with guns, but the guy is scared of flying. You just never can tell. Welcome, Bluey. I'm thrilled to have you here.
How are you, matey?
Yeah, real good. And mate, you're a little bit dark now, so if you want to open that, yeah, that's a bit better.
Bit better.
But look, thanks very much for coming on. Just by way of explanation, viewers, Bluey is in his truck. He's coming up from, he's just dropped some race cars off down at Bathurst for the Bathurst race. He's returning. So he's on his mobile phone on the road speaking to me from being on the road in New South Wales. And I'm really, really thrilled that he took time out of his still busy schedule to speak to me. Mate, before we go into the policing side and dive right into the interview, can you tell me about Clan O'Gorman?
Yep. Mum's name was Mavis. Dad was Jack. Mum had a tough life. She had a tough upbringing. She was put into a baby's home when she was a couple of months old because her mum wasn't married, and in those days that was terrible. Dad, strict Irish Catholic upbringing. Everything was sort of black and white. Dad went away to the war, come back with a serious drinking problem, which can't be diagnosed as anything other than that mongrel disease, alcoholism. Shortly after I was born, Dad stopped drinking. I never saw him have a drink, and I never saw him affected by grog. Dad still stands as probably the best man I've ever known. I've known a lot of good people. He was a genuine, hard-working. He drove buses for a living. He struggled with depression, which in hindsight now at 75 years of age, I realise was post-traumatic stress. I don't use the word D. It's not a disorder, it's an injury. And Prince Harry was the first to highlight that. Dad, no doubt, had that, as did most of the blokes who went away and did their bit during World War II. Dad was the sole breadwinner in our family. Mum was a brilliant mum. They both had their struggles, as everybody else has in life, and they raised a pretty good family. I can honestly say that close to Dad's death, he and I were always tight. I'm very much like him in a lot of ways, but nowhere near as good a bloke as he was. But he, close to his death, he said, you know, John, and Dad never said a lot, but he said, you know, John, he said, a man's pretty lucky. All our kids, and everybody was still kids. By that stage, a lot of us were 50, 60 years of age. All our kids did well, and none of them embarrassed us or ashamed us. And I thought that was the brilliant closing gratitude of a good man for having a good family. But we weren't good family by decree. We were a good family because of the example of Mum and Dad. As I said, they both had shortcomings. We all have. But I was lucky to have two fantastic parents, great brothers and sisters. As you said, lawyers, nuns, various other occupations in the medical profession. And I'm proud of every one of them and every one of their achievements. We have differences. We have differences of opinion. We agree to disagree. And when people disagree with me, they're entitled to be wrong.
Yeah. yeah. Mate, I come from an Irish Catholic clan, so I kind of understand. Mate, could I get you to swipe your camera and switch on another light? Thanks. Yeah. And look, you know, one of your brothers is, of course, Terry. And mate,
is that okay?
Yeah,
that'll do.
Yeah, it's a bit glary, mate, but that'll do. One of your brothers is Terry, whom I've met. Yep. I've got to say, I really admire him. Now, for the few viewers that might know, he's actually the head of the Australian Council of Civil Liberties. And I had a conversation with him at your send-off, and you know, as he was asking, who's that guy, the weird guy in the blue shirt that keeps on bringing me beers? That was me, you know. And I really admire his intellect. And I come from an Irish Catholic mob too, as I said, and we're in I want to say this politely, we're opinionated, rambunctious, and we get some pretty interesting family get-togethers. You know, and I think you'll get this. Christmas, weddings, and funerals. So yeah, it can get pretty interesting. Mate, what do you guys talk about at those?
Maybe talk about everything. Terry is a bloke that I admire tremendously, obviously. We've had differences of opinion over the years. We've been publicly, vehemently opposed. At one stage, I forget how long it was, but we were so angry at each other, probably angry at each other's standpoint rather than each other, but we didn't speak for a little while. It was only a matter of months, but Terry's done a massive amount of good for society. Yeah. Danny, another brother involved in the law, he's a senior counsel. He does a massive amount for our Indigenous people with land rights and all that sort of stuff. He does it quietly. He's just a brilliant bloke. Like, I probably shouldn't mention individual ones, and we'll be here all night going through the whole list. But yeah, Terry stands tall. Yeah, they all do. And the only reason, by way of explanation, the only reason I mention him is because he's the one that I kind of had a chat with, and obviously being in the police myself, I kind of like get that. But look, let's go into the policing side of things. When were you sworn in, and can you tell me about the service that you joined? Yeah, there's a bit of background. My mum was, as I said, a great lady. She never had a family. She was adopted out. She was put in a baby's home and then fostered at 13, and the bloke with the family tried to sexually assault her, and she hit the toe, and she fended for herself in a girls' home. Mum was all about security. when you got a job, it was in the public service, state or federal, the bank, insurance, something like that. So I went to some Christian Brothers School, St Pat's at Shorncliffe. I was no shining light as a student. I did okay. I finished a junior or grade 10 in today's language, as most people did. Mum and Dad simply couldn't afford for me to go any further. And to be honest with you, I had no inclination to go any further. I wanted to get out and earn a living. My first paid job was when I was 8. There was a bakery at Nunda called Curran's Bakery, and I went and knocked on their door just before the Christmas holidays and asked could I have a job helping on one of the baker's carts, which used to deliver bread house to house. And I did that for that Christmas holidays and the next Christmas holidays. And then I got a job in what they call a fruit barn these days. It was a big fruit shop at Virginia in the suburb of Brisbane. This is going to sound weird, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I got such a thrill. Like, there was never money at home, never. And any dramas at home were basically around money. Mum was a bit like me. Money was made to be spent, and Dad was trying to earn it. I got the greatest thrill of coming home with a bit of money that I'd earned and giving it to Mum. And I think that comes from our upbringing. Mum used to always, Dad never said much. Mum had a lot of wisdom that you didn't realise was wisdom until later on. And she used to say, be grateful for what you got. Be grateful for what you got. A lot of people got a lot less. And another one of her sayings was, no matter how badly off you think you are, there are plenty of people worse. And that was in the back of my mind during my life in various ways, I'm sure, although it's only recently when I'm getting old that I've reflected on a bit of this stuff. And that helped me terrifically. Okay, time come to leave school. By that stage, when I was about 12, Dad happened to mention that the bloke who was washing the buses in the depot that Dad used to drive and call black and white buses at Sandgate in Brisbane, the bloke who was washing the buses gave it away. It was 3 days before the Christmas school holidays, so I went down and knocked on the door of the owner. No one was like getting to see the Pope. Anyway, he allowed me in. And I said, can I have the job? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, for the school holidays. And he said, well, have you asked your dad? Because Dad was the union rep at that depot, TWU union rep. And I said, well, I'd no good asking Dad till I find out if I got the job. So I got the job. 12 years of age, they had a big depot. Here I am driving buses, only in first gear, around the yard, down to where I had to wash them and then reverse them back up and park them. I thought I was the king. Plus I was taking money home. Then that continued on in all the school holidays until I left school, and I did it as a full-time job. Then I was about 15, I think, and I got a job in the public service as a clerk in the State Works Department. Now, anybody who knows me knows that's probably the most unlikely occupation for me to be successful in, because I'm hopeless at paperwork. Not hopeless, but I haven't got much interest in paperwork. And sitting in an office wasn't me. I worked, my boss was a bloke called Cole Casey, a champion fellow, champion bloke. And I came in contact with his son, another champion bloke, Paul Casey, in my role at the union when he got a job in the industrial section of the police department many years later. Okay, I did that for a while. I joined the CMF, Citizens and Military Forces, became the regular army, the Army Reserve, in a transport unit. I learned to drive trucks and old Blitzers and Studebakers, World War II gear. That started my love affair with trucks. And when as soon as I turned 17, I joined the CMF. Within a couple of months, I had my truck license, which you could convert to a civilian license. By the time I was 18, I had my bus license. By the time I was 19, or 18 and a half, I had my semi-trailer license, all through the Army. So I was always taking leave without pay to go driving trucks. Then I was lined up to join. The Vietnam War was just firing up. And we were offered, I was doing an officer course for the CMF. We were offered a course at Portsea for 6 months for a short-term commission in the regular army, which was no doubt to go to Vietnam. I was accepted. 2 days before I was due to go, I got called back in. They said, you've got a medical problem, you can't go. So I went around a heap of doctors, got certificates from all sorts of specialists. It turns out I got a weird curvature in my spine. That was all it was. So I then went, when I was 15, I tried to join the police as a cadet. They said I had flat feet. Then I went back in with all these certificates. Long story short, I got in, started at the depot on the 12th of April 1966, straight after Easter. Got sworn in on the 30th of June 1966. Went to Zilmia, was my first posting for the first 3 months. During that 3 months, the exhibition was on. We got sent into the exhibition. I was performing traffic duty outside the museum corner, directing points, and some traffic sergeant went past, reckoned I did a good job, so I was moved up the traffic branch for the rest of the Easter. So I have got traffic branch service, 10 days. 10 days. That'll come relevant later.
Your secret's safe with me.
Yeah, right. Got on you, Matty. Because we always have a go at the traffic lights. Okay. I did uniform service at Zilmia, into Roma Street, which was then the Central City Police Station. Walked the beat, drove the patrol cars when you were lucky, worked the drunks van. Mentioning the drunks van was a black International or a black Ford, about a 2-ton truck with a big cage on the back, big shed on the back. And there was a magnificent gentleman by the name of First Class Sergeant Neil Murphy. He was in charge of the drunks van. He worked it every night, Tuesday to Saturday. Sunday night, Monday night, other people worked it. That was his 2 days off. He and 2 other fellows worked the van. One night I was working the van because someone went sick. I was driving the van for Sergeant Murphy. And it was like a regular bus run. He went to pick up the poor down and out alcoholic poor buggers who were scattered around town under bridges, in alleyways. He knew where to get every one of them. Every night, come on, in you get. And these poor fellas, in the vast majority fellas, every now and again there was a lady, were just afflicted with that mongrel disease called alcoholism. And he said to me the first night, he said, I don't care what opinions you've got. I'll never forget this. I don't care what opinions you've got. Well, then we discussed a couple of things. He knew I didn't drink. He said, if I see you showing anything but kindness to any of these people, you got a problem on your hands, young fella. And I never, ever forgot that. And he said to me, but for the grace of God, any one of these people could be you or could be me. And that again, coupled with Mum, that put in my head that people are to be treated with dignity. Another bloke, Sergeant Kev Weiss, still alive, 93, 94, one of the toughest men I've ever met, lives in Toowoomba, great bloke. I was on the Bodgy Squad. The Juvenile Delinquency Squad was its proper name. We worked out of the Roma Street Station. There was probably a dozen, 15 people on there. And that's where I first met a bloke who I wanted to really expand on, called Col Dillon. I'll come back to Col.
Yeah.
I was working in the Bodgy Squad and met Kev Weiss. Kev was a tough fellow. I think he'd been a weightlifter. He never answered that question even now he just gives you a silly grin. But he was immensely strong and never had a drink in his life, which I haven't either. But he was a bloke who impressed me, and I still count him amongst the really staunch friends. And he said to me, listen, he used to call me Bluey. Listen, Bluey, I'll tell you something. Don't treat anyone by their appearance. He said, just because a bloke's got long hair and tattoos and looks like a grub doesn't mean he is. And just because a bloke's dressed in a 3-piece suit and looks like he's a real decent man doesn't mean he is. He said some of the biggest grubs I've met wore 3-piece suits, and some of the most decent people I met were dirty and grubby. Another good lesson. I worked in uniform for a while at the city station, and it could be alleged, that I had an interaction with a gentleman who was allegedly a friend of the then commissioner, Mr. Bischoff. It happened about 11:40 p.m. outside a notorious hamburger bar on Petrie Terrace called the Night Owl. And the allegation was made that there could have been some physical contact between him and I. My memory's blurry.
Yeah.
It wasn't too blurry. That happened at 20 to 12 the Friday night. 9 o'clock Saturday morning, I'm standing in the inspector's office at the city at Roma Street Police Station. No, and the inspector never came in on a Saturday morning. And there was a short discussion. He said, be in my office Monday morning. The commissioner's not happy. You'll be getting a transfer. And I thought, I like working at Roma Street. I don't want to get to Newmarket or Mitchelton, somewhere like that. I wasn't far out. When I got my transfer, it started with them, but it was called Mount Isa. The following Wednesday, I was on the Sunlander heading for Cairns on my way to Mount Isa. So the lesson in that is don't clash with a friend of the commissioner. I was in Mount Isa for a while. The sun got to me and genuinely got to me with my skin, freckled skin. I had sores that wouldn't heal up. And I got in a bit of an incident where a bloke fired a shot at me and it got the rubber insert of the elastic side of the boots, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
And it sort of welded that bit of the elastic to me foot, to me ankle, created an abscess that wouldn't heal in Mount Isa. I got to transfer back to Brisbane. The only place I could get to was the CI branch counter, an inside job, which I didn't like at all. But I won't bore you with the details. But by an absolute travesty, I was offered a job as a plainclothes constable with the aim of becoming a detective. A short version of how I got that, I found a brother of a bloke who was here playing in the police golf tournament from South Australia. I found out what hotel he was living in. And the brother from South Australia, he and his brother in Brisbane hadn't spoken for a while, but the bloke from South Australia was in the same lodge as the then boss of the CI branch. So I was offered a job as a plainclothes constable.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. August 69, I started as a detective, plainclothes constable. After a while, you become an appointed detective. I stayed as a detective until I fought very strongly after the inquiry, Fitzgerald Enquiry, to work in uniform. Eventually, I achieved that. When I was a detective, I dealt with various things. Again, I wasn't great on paperwork, but I was half okay. And I say that with humility. I was half okay at dealing with situations where firearms were involved or violence and stuff like that. And it's not to say that I was any better than anybody else, just that my skills, however, probably a bit off, I learnt in the CMF for infantry tactics or whatever, I don't know, but I was half all right at that stuff. I went through the CI branch, worked on some pretty significant jobs. I was on the periphery of the Whiskey A Go-Go investigation. I worked on a number of things. There were some murders that I helped as an investigator that weren't solved, and that weighs heavily on my heart even today. That the families of the poor victims have never had some sort of peace restored to them by having the murderer of their loved one identified. And that weighs still heavily on my heart, but it is what it is. Along came the inquiry, which was a living hell. And after the inquiry, I was determined, absolutely fanatically determined that I was going to work in uniform, because there was no way I was in any way ashamed of being a Queensland police officer, despite the revelations of the inquiry. I went to a place called Brisbane Mobile Patrol that was filled with like-minded lunatics like myself. The commissioner who set it up, Ray Whitwright, in the mid-70s, guaranteed in public that anybody who rang AAA would have a police car outside their house within 5 minutes in the greater Brisbane area. That was Brisbane Mobile Patrols. It attracted a great kaleidoscope of personalities, of people. Some people went there as trainee constables in their first posting and never wanted to leave. Every shift was fun. We were first responders. If anyone was getting belted, you could better stand back, because the odds were going to get evened up pretty quickly when mobiles arrived. Then when I finished my term with the union, I got promoted to inspector. I was duty officer for the Brisbane region, Brisbane Metropolitan North region. And then I went to Cairns, was there for 5 years and loved it. Came back to Brisbane, worked in Bob Atkinson's office and retired from there. So that's me as a copper.
And mate, I'm kind of like you. Actually, mate, if there's another light you can put on and open things to get some light on, that'd be great. Oh, actually, no, that's worse.
That's worse. It's not a good head.
Shine it on you rather than shine it on your face rather than on the camera. But mate, see, that's the thing. Like I've got I'm still technically in. I'm on career break leave now. This year's my 30th year. And like I've hit my use by date. I don't think I'm going back. But I don't believe they paid me to do it for the first 10 years. Like
Oh yeah.
I would have done that for free. Like,
Mate, I was lucky. I loved it every day. No, that's not true. I loved my whole police career. There were some days that I wished I hadn't been there for various reasons, and we might touch on that later. But there were some people that I met that I wished I hadn't, who were inside the coppers. Not many, very few. But I can honestly say that I used to be disappointed when I had a day off. But then I'd go driving trucks or coaches, try to get a few extra bob. And I don't want to go too much into my private life, but my family paid a price because I was not smart enough to realise that if I was putting the same effort into my family as I put into being a copper, that things might have been different. But there's no rewind button, and I'm stuck with the consequences of my decisions. That's the way it is.
yeah.
I mentioned the Fitzgerald Enquiry.
Yeah, that's kind of mate, I'd really like to if it's okay, we've actually and so because many of my listeners do have asked us, like, Maloney, do you actually have an interview structure?
No.
But I do. I assure you.
You do not.
And there are some questions that I'm going to kind of come back to with Bluey, but I'd really like to dive into the whole Fitzgerald thing and
Okay.
But to give some context, like, you and I know what it's about. You got to remember, we're kind of dinosaurs. And I actually have some very young listeners. Like, I know, just looking at this now, I've actually got some guys who aren't in the police and who are 19 who are kind of tuned in. So can you give a really quick background to the Fitzgerald Inquiry, what it was and what it revealed, just to give some context?
Okay. The political climate in Queensland was such that the media, some sections of the media, were always attacking the political party in power, who were the Conservatives at that stage, and everything they could find to attack them was used. They found the most effective one was to make allegations against the police, which was all great stuff. Except most of the allegations were unfounded. So for years and years and years, working coppers read this, this is what is said to be happening, or this is what's said to be happening. And you became a bit immune to it. Then there was a bit of carry on about there was brothels operating as massage parlours were operating as brothels. There was unlawful gambling happening, mainly around the valley, but in a couple other places. And there was places selling grog unlicensed. Now, let's put it into context. All those things are social matters. They're not criminal matters. They're no victims. No one comes and sticks a shotgun in your ear and makes you go to an unlawful casino and gamble. No one makes you put a bet on with an SP bookie. And every pub in Australia in those days, coming out of World War II and all the way through, had an SP bookie. Everybody knew about it. Most people couldn't have cared less. I was one. I couldn't have cared less. There was no victims, no interest to me. The same with the prostitution. That's people's own choice. And the same with the unlicensed. Who cares? Not me. I was more interested in helping with murder investigations, rapes, armed robberies, stuff like that. And most police were the same. They were busy enough doing what they were doing without worrying about what the licensing branch were doing. Now, the licensing branch were tasked with dealing with all of those three things, plus a few other things. Pardon me. Now, I want to make it extremely clear that there were hundreds and hundreds of people worked in the licensing branch over many, many years who were decent, honest, dedicated, valuable police officers. The legislation was difficult to enforce, more than difficult to enforce. And I won't go into details, but the legislation to gain evidence of prostitution, I'll leave it to your imagination, what had to happen. And not too many coppers' wives were too fanatically supportive of their husband getting evidence of prostitution. So people sort of, so what? I couldn't care less. Unlawful gambling, same thing. The old days, a few foreigners having a gamble, beauty, and then it grew, and whatever. But on the 11th of May, 1987, Four Corners showed a program called the Moonlight State. And I had contact with the producers and the person in that while that story was being developed. And I thought, and I think so I said to him, you're talking about rubbish here. It's rubbish. Oh, yeah, but there's money changing. Oh, money changing hands. Oh, look, I've heard all that rubbish. Well, they did their program. It was broadcast on the 11th of May, 1987, called the Moonlight State, and it floored me. I watched it, and I was at home and watched it. And after it finished, I sat there, and I couldn't stop this tumble dryer of emotions, anger, sadness, suspicion, going around in my head. Next day I went to work, and of course it was all over the place. Well, within a few weeks, Joe Bialkapizis, who was then the Premier, was out of the state, or within a few days, was out of the state. Acting Premier, a bloke called Bill Gunn, for his own whatever reason, politically, I don't care, announced they're going to have an inquiry. And they picked a fellow called Tony Fitzgerald. There's a bit of folklore behind that. I'll leave it go. The inquiry started. Now, let me tell you, when that inquiry started, anybody who had any allegation to make against any police officer had the perfect platform. Went to the inquiry, made their allegations, and it was fed straight into the media, broadcast all over the news that night, all over the Courier Mail next morning, all over the Daily Sun all over the Brisbane Telegraph the next afternoon, with no opportunity for the person accused to address the accusations.
Yeah.
This went on for a while.
So much for due process.
Oh, well, yeah, but it was new ground. And don't forget, lawyers at the taste of blood of coppers are hard to control.
Yeah.
Why they went. Now, that went on for time. And at that stage, I was involved with the union executive, the police union. A fellow called Col Chant was the president, and a great bloke, a bloke of real integrity, a real good human being and a good copper. And the stress of it actually got to him. He had to bypass heart operations. I said to him, mate, I was the vice president. I said, listen, park this inquiry thing. I'll look after that. If they want to make allegations against me, they can go their hardest. I knew I hadn't copped a quid. I knew I wasn't involved in any of the stuff they were carrying on about. So I was a bit arrogant, I suppose. From that minute on, I was determined to be on the front foot to defend what I thought was every copper in Queensland who I thought was honest and decent and doing the right thing. I was pretty naive because before too long, the lawyers had done a bit of digging and they found a couple of people who were making allegations that looked like they had a bit of substance to them. Prior to this, we were able to put a process in place that if allegations were made, then the copper that was targeted had notice to prepare a defence, blah, blah, blah. The union engaged good legal representation. Then the rumours started flying around that indemnities were being offered by the inquiry to people who were involved in corruption, that if they were prepared to admit their own corruption, they were prepared to give evidence that the lawyers wanted them to give against other people, then they would be allowed to resign from the police, immune from prosecution, so long as they told the truth. Well, as a copper, I'm a bit cynical about that. Firstly, if you're involved in corruption, there's a photo finish to the bottom of the sewer of human filth for corrupt coppers, and it's with pedophiles. If you're involved in corruption, the last thing you're going to do is honour any commitment to tell the truth about your corruption unless there's something in it for you. Like the very basis of someone who's involved in corruption, that you're self-centred and you're prepared to do anything for a miserable, dirty, filthy quid. The lawyers perhaps couldn't have seen that for the red mist that they had in their eyes, I suppose. They made all these offers, and I thought arrogantly, you're wasting your time, old mate. There's no one involved in this. You won't get any rollovers. Then the rollovers started. I won't name names, because people have got families and whatever. But one bloke rolled over and agreed to talk to the lawyers when they got to the hospital bed where he'd put himself into because he had heart problems. He was fondling his rosary beads when he spoke to them. What a hypocritical grub.
Judas.
Then they all started rolling over on each other. And then probably one of the greatest pieces of garbage that ever took human form, a bloke by the name of Jack Herbert had bolted to London because he was a grub forever. He was involved in writing a book after the inquiry called The Bagman. And in that he said, and I'm paraphrasing, I will do anything I can, no matter how big or how small, to get any benefit I can for myself, no matter how big or how small. So he shot through to London. People were providing him with information. And he was located in London, brought back to Australia, and then used as the great witness of all this corruption. He was the architect of it, for God. If it was a corporation, he was the managing director or chief operating officer of the corruption. He, pardon me, with others, set the structure up that put this cancer into the licensing branch. I knew nothing about it. Most of the police who had never worked in the licensing branch knew nothing about it. And even some of the people who worked in the licensing branch only suspected it might have been going on at different times. Let's get to I mentioned Col Dillon. Col Dillon is an Indigenous man, a proud Indigenous man, one of the most decent, courageous, worthwhile human beings I have ever met, and one of the best, most decent coppers I've ever met. I've counted him as a friend since he was in the Bodgy Squad in Roman Street before I went in there. I think I took his place when he got transferred to Toowong. Col Dillon was at the licensing branch. And as I said, he's an Aboriginal man. The grubs, the corrupt bastards in the licensing branch, used his Aboriginality against him. If he was set out to knock off an SP bookmaker in a pub, the bloke got the phone call, don't take any bets from blackfellas. So Col was set up to fail. When the inquiry got going well and truly, nobody put their hand up to give evidence they were offered a bribe while they worked at the licensing branch and knocked it back, except Col Dillon. Col stood tall and he said that he was offered a bribe on at least 2 occasions. One, I won't say who the grub was that offered it to him, but he's a filthy foul. Anyway, he was offered money. It was left in his locker, and he opened up and found the locker, and said grub was standing close by, and Col said, what's this doing in here? Oh, he said, oh, that's from so-and-so. He said, I don't want it, and threw it at him. Coming Christmas time, there's a bottle of Chivas Regal whiskey put in his locker.
Yeah.
Col didn't know what to do. He didn't know who was, by this stage, he knew the place was pretty rotten. Or there were people in there who were pretty rotten. Let's make that clear. Not everybody who was there, even at that time, was rotten. The corrupt bastards are the ultimate survivors. They know who to approach, know who not to approach. And a lot of the blokes there, they wouldn't have been going to approach. They would have got a smack in the mouth. But somehow they made the mistake of thinking Col might have been a starter. They didn't know him, obviously. They left this bottle of scotch in his locker, and he didn't know what the hell was going to happen if he put on a stink about this bottle of scotch. So he took it home not knowing what to do with it. He produced that bottle of scotch at the inquiry, when I'll mention later, and it was proven that the bottle of Chivas Regal he produced at the inquiry was bottled at the same time as he says it was, and was from a batch they could identify from the distillery at that time. So the inquiry's ticking along, and people are having allegations made, they're denying them, and various people are going to give evidence and they're denying it. Col Dillon stood tall amongst police. He was in the position to be able to give evidence of direct approaches of corrupt payment. He went to the inquiry. I didn't even know he was going. My brother Frank, who Col was working under at that stage, knew, and he'd supported Col. I got a phone call when Col was in the inquiry, and I had another court case on, actually. And after the inquiry, after that day's court hearing, I was walking down George Street and Cole was walking towards me. And I looked at him and he had tears in his eyes and tears pouring down his face. He sat in the witness box, told what he could tell, and he said to the public gallery, words to the effect, and I wasn't there, but I know very closely what he said, please don't judge all the decent police in Queensland on what I've just told you about these people. Now, Cole Dillon had a campaign mounted against him by the corrupt grubs and some of their mates who might have been corrupt themselves but were mates. And it was a dirty, nasty campaign. Cole stood tall. He survived it, but he paid a hell of a price health-wise. And I believe Cole should have been promoted merely on the fact of the evidence he gave. After the inquiry, pardon me, a new police commissioner was sworn in and he was brought from Victoria. They brought a new promotional system in called promotion by merit. Well, that was a joke. But an approach was made direct to the commissioner, and I know the approach was made. I made the approach. That Cole Dillon should be promoted because of his integrity, his commitment, and his courage by telling the truth of his evidence in the inquiry. And it wasn't said to my face, but it was said, I know every copper should have done that. That's nothing special. He won't get promoted because of that, or words to that effect were bandied about. Now, Cole was promoted to inspector and retired as an inspector. I go out of my way to say I have never met a man of a higher level of integrity, a more decent human being, a more courageous human being. It's all right to have courage chasing up with some lunatic with a gun, might be able to bluff him, whatever, and get the gun off him or whatever. But it takes a special sort of courage to do what Cole Dillon did, and he did it. And he will always stand tall in my book, and he stands well above most people. After the inquiry, during the inquiry, they were shown to be about 12 or 13 people involved in the corruption. 12 or 13 out of 4,500 plus police officers at that time. The whole police force was painted as being tainted with corruption. What a load of crap. One section, predominantly, the licensing branch, was the place where corruption was practiced by a very small number of people who went through that branch. That is the truth of the corruption that was involved in the Queensland Police Service. It suits the media every now and again to blow the trumpets and carrying on, and certain other people, about the corruption that was riddled through the police force. That is a blatant, filthy lie and an insult to every police officer who was working then, who wasn't involved in the corruption, to those of our comrades who have fallen in the line of duty, and to those of the decent people who have retired and died and who served honourably. And they should be recognised.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look,
Yep.
Yeah, here's
there he is. There he is.
I recommend the book.
Look, they've got, pardon me interrupting, Matty, they've got statues of Wally Lewis, Darren Lockyer, various other people outside Lang Park because they were leaders and standouts in their sport. There should be a statue of Cole Dillon outside the front door of police headquarters and say, this is what you aspire to be, that man there.
And his son has carried on that legacy. I had the privilege of interviewing Anthony Dillon, who's a doctor of psychology. And by the way, mate, if you can get some more light on your face, again, not behind you, that'd be great. I mean, if you can't, you can't. I'll keep talking while you're trying to do that.
How's that work?
Yeah. I suppose that's we both.
Mate, I'm in the cabin of a truck, and I'm not much I can do about it actually.
That's all right, bro. You can't.
Yeah.
But anyway, mate, the thing is, Anthony is a doctor of clinical psychology. He performs research. He also has a clinical practice, and he is vocally pro-police. He's like, he knows, he knows about that kind of stuff too. Like,
Oh yeah.
And he too. And there's a very good chance there's a very good chance he's going to hear this, but I'm going to say it and embarrass him anyway. Mate, his son's got the same character. Let me tell you, he's a brilliant man standing up for what he believes in and speaking, speaking the truth.
I'd be surprised if he didn't.
Yeah, mate. I'm telling you, he's someone else. Honestly, I'm privileged to know. And I interviewed him not last week, the week before, I think. And that interview is at 3,200 or something views. So
yeah,
that's incredible. But the courage it must have taken him to stand up. And one of the Rocky coppers that I knew, and I don't remember his name, involved in all that because I was sworn in 91, so just afterwards. There's quite a few coppers on here who I'm getting comments from who I went through the academy with. You guys know who you are. And I don't remember which one of the old detectives that it was said is like, oh yeah, Cole Dillon, yeah, he can look after himself. Don't you worry about it.
Oh yeah. Oh, mate, as I said, Cole was in the Bodgy squad before me, and they made a mistake. They made a mistake with me, but most blokes of the Bodgy squad could stand their ground. Let me tell you, I mentioned Kev Weiss, one of the strongest, toughest men I've ever met in my life. Their job was to clean up the bodgies as they were in those days. They were just louts who used to hang around milk bars of all places and start fights. Well, we thought if they want to start the fights, we'll finish them. Good stuff. And that's the way it worked. I've seen Cole Dillon show courage in a physical sense at brawls. I was at a job where a gun was involved with Cole. He showed as much guts as anybody I've ever seen. And anybody who stood Cole Dillon up, even today, he's like me, he's an old man now, but I wouldn't be too game to stand toe-to-toe with Cole Dillon and think I was going to have a chance because there's no chance to be winning, but even have a chance of a photo finish or points finish, forget about it. Cole Dillon stands tall, mate, and he could go a bit, let me tell you.
Yeah, so physical courage and courage of character, which was you talking about before, because courage does manifest itself in a number of different ways.
Oh, yeah.
And, to show the courage of character, to put up with these relentless attacks on his character, the relentless attacks on his credibility, the relentless attacks of all those sort of stuff. Again, that does take a certain degree of courage.
Oh yeah.
So,
Matty, before we leave the inquiry, to show how far-reaching the evil of the false accusations, there was two people committed suicide.
Yeah.
Who had false accusations made and were shown to be false. And these two blokes committed suicide because they saw they had no way of clearing their name. And, there was plenty of others who did it real tough, I can tell you. I never had allegations made against me. And that's nothing special, neither did 4,500 others. But it was like the opportunity. People who might know Jimmy Sharman's boxing troupe that used to tour the countryside and Brophy's boxing troupe, they used to stand at the front, step up, now's your chance. And they were invited amateur boxers to fight their boxers. Well, the Fitzgerald Enquiry should have had a banner out the front, step up, now's your chance to kick the coppers, because they gave everyone every opportunity.
And it must have been tough. I actually I joined afterwards. I marched into the academy in 91.
Yeah.
And we were part of the famous 400. And like the morale, because we were just, I was 19 years old, turned 20 at the academy. And all I wanted to do was go out and lock up criminals. And look, it's a kind of weird thing to say. You were one of the guys I kind of looked up to because you were all over the news and all that sort of stuff. And you had an impact on that. I don't mind articulating that. And then we went out to these bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 19 kids that just want to get out and lock up dirtbags. And then you walked into this demoralised, just completely gutted police service. And it's really funny. I wish I had taken a photograph of it because my FTO, Bernie Parle, he still had the old uniform on.
Yeah.
So day one for me, like I'm in the brand spanking, back then new uniform. We've had a change of uniform since in the light blues and the airport.
Yeah.
And he's still in what was, and basically the old uniform was basically British battle dress, really. Like it was.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, big old chevrons and all that kind of stuff. Like, what a photograph that would have made.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But these guys, and I did have a guy. There was a guy who was mentioned in the Fitzgerald Enquiry who was working at Rockhampton and who was cleared. And over beers, he said the same sort of thing. He goes, "Mate, it was just a." Because, you know, don't get me wrong, there was some dead set Judases there, and he also made the observation, going off on a quick but relevant tangent. He'd read Dante's Inferno, and the lowest reaches of hell. For those that aren't familiar with it, it's Dante is guided through hell by an ancient Greek poet, actually. And the lowest reach of hell is a place called Dis, and it's reserved for the traitors.
Yeah.
It's reserved for the Judases.
Yeah.
He made an observation that he goes, look, you know, those blokes that did that, the dead set Judases, there is a special place in hell for them. And he explained that story to me. I read the book afterwards, incidentally. He goes, look, I was mentioned, and I just, you know, like, it was just the fact that I was mentioned. Like, my friends knew. He had to leave Brisbane because everyone else. But the simple fact that, you know, I got a jersey.
Yeah, mate, before we leave the inquiry.
I don't want, mate, we can talk about this as long as you want.
During the inquiry, I had to do my police work as well as go look after the union side of the inquiry. When Commissioner O'Sullivan took over, great bloke too, he didn't have much to beat in his predecessor, and I often reminded him of that. When he took over, I negotiated a structure that from then on, after I finished and I was determined I wasn't going to benefit from it, that the president of the union could be seconded from his police duties to perform the roles of the president of the union. And because I firmly and still believe that the community of Queensland benefit from having a full-time president looking after what the interests and welfare of the police, but properly representing the true story of what the police are doing. Now, during the inquiry, I had to work, I was working as well as going to the inquiry, as well as doing the union stuff. And I was working night work, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I was a detective. And I'll never forget, I was driving down Charlotte Street, coming up the corner of Elizabeth Street, worked 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. It would have been about 11:30. Pulled up the traffic lights. There's two blokes full of grog, leaned against the pub, and they picked the car as detective's car, like you didn't have to be Einstein. And I can't say what they said, but look at those two filthy, corrupt so-and-sos. Well, mate, I lost it. And I'm telling you, I lost it. I flew out of the car and I smacked him fair in the ear, knocked him on his ass, and locked him up for insulting language. And when we got to the watch house, I said to him, don't you ever accuse me of being corrupt. I said, there is no lower form of life than a corrupt copper, and you accuse me of it. And he was all apologies. He's half full of grog, you know, and he thought he was full of bravado with his mate. Oh, look at these two corrupt so-and-so. Well, mate, I apologised to him for smacking him, and he said, well, if I was a copper, I probably would have smacked me too. And we finished up funny sort of friends for a while. We lost track. But to try to explain, you wouldn't understand because you weren't in there beforehand. But to go through all that, and while it's still on, to have someone accuse you of being corrupt when you're fighting the filth that those bastards, those corrupt bastards, brought on the decent coppers of the state was just a massive, massive insult. We got out of it. We came through it. For the better or worse, it's no good even debating it. It is what it is. Today's police officers, coming out of the inquiry, I was able to negotiate a very good pay rise, actually, very good pay rise. But it was a big exercise, and I got seconded to the union office to do it, actually, by Police Minister McEnroth after the Labor government was elected. And I have no politics, by the way. I'm totally neutral politically, but Terry McEnroth was a brilliant police minister. We got the pay rise, and the other thing I'm very, very proud of making a significant contribution to was the Police Powers and Responsibilities Act, which gave police the mechanics of the ability to do their work completely openly, completely honestly, with the legal backing to perform what had to be done to get crime solved, to get evidence, to do all those sort of things. And the public of Queensland are better served now by the quality of evidence placed before the courts than they were before, because things have improved out of a sort, like technology's come along. You've got DNA, you've got all sorts of things, telephone tracking, cameras, etc. But before then, the old detectives trod a pretty hard path trying to get evidence. But now it's a lot better. And the police work on behalf of the community. They don't work for themselves. They work on behalf of the community, keep the community safe. And I'm proud that coming out of the inquiry, I and the union were able to make a significant contribution to getting the legal framework for police to do their job more efficiently. It was good.
Right, and I think you're not are you underestimating your role on that? Just to give some context to any civilian viewers, and I want to articulate this carefully, but like again, Bluey has kind of pointed out that there were magnificent scientific advances that have happened since then that's given us the material evidence there. Before that, basically, if you didn't have a confession, you kind of had nothing. And in Des Sturgis's book, The Tangled Web, he talks about how he spoke to the Whiskey a Go-Go killer Finch bomber, and there are all these allegations made that the police verbaled him, and what verbaling means, again, for civilian viewers and for people who are unfamiliar with Fitzgerald, was an indication that the police just made up confessions and wrote them in their notebooks and all that sort of stuff. Now, of course, Mr. Sturgis didn't approve of that. No decent kind of person does. But he reported that Finch himself, during one of the conversations, and this is in the book, The Tangled Web, like I'm quoting almost word for word, Finch himself said, he goes, look, I don't approve of it. It's terrible, but I understand why they did it, because the police really kind of had nothing else to do. If they just didn't have enough and they knew you did it. What he was reporting there was if there's a dynamic set up where one group of people are really responsible for justice administration, being the police disproportionately, and they don't have the tools to do the job, they're kind of going to start working around stuff. Now that ends up being a really, really bad dynamic, because if the police are lying, and there is a culture of like, well, we're lying for the right reasons, we're doing the right things, we're at point A, we've got to get to point B, there's a hurdle in between, somehow we've got to get over this hurdle. Yeah, it's bad that the people do that. I'm not making excuses for anyone that does that, but you can kind of understand why it happens. And the people who are setting up the rules and setting up the path, the track, it's their responsibility to ensure that people are armed to do their job so they can do it honestly, reasonably, in good faith, without having to misrepresent anything. So
can I make a point, Matty?
Yeah.
I'll come back to Finch very briefly, but it's interesting now. Those allegations can never, ever, ever be made. Every conversation is tape recorded. Every conversation is audio recorded.
Yep.
Police wear body-worn cameras. There can be no basis for someone saying the coppers have verbaled me. It's interesting with Finch, and I like telling this story because every second crook or every crook that got locked up said, yeah, the coppers bashed me, the coppers verbaled me. Finch and the bloke is co-offender, John Andrew Stewart, murdered 15 people by putting a petrol bomb in a nightclub that killed 15 people. They were charged with murdering one person. Served their sentences. Finch was deported back to England. Stewart died in jail. Finch is back in England, and Jana Vent, who was a pretty good standard of a reporter back in those days, she arranged for Finch to go to a television studio in London to be interviewed live by satellite. Finch is sitting there, all lovely. I'll cut this brief. Jana Vent said to him, went through all the preamble, and said, look, let's cut to the chase. You were involved in the Whiskey a Go-Go. And he sort of nodded, didn't say a word. And she said, listen, now's the time. Did you and Johnny Stewart do the Whiskey a Go-Go bombing? He said, yes. She said, hang on, you're telling me you did it? He said, yes. She said, just so long as I got it clear, you and John Stewart, yes. She said, well, why, when you went to trial, did you say the police bashed you? Oh, you got to do that. Why did you say the police verbaled you? Oh, well, you always do that. Well, Now you're saying you did it. Yes. And she said, well, aren't you concerned about telling the truth now? He said, why should I? I've done my time. And I'll never forget her words. She said, you were charged with one murder. There's 14 other murders you haven't been charged with. He looked up looked upwards. He said, what are all these lights? Where am I? What's happening? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the game that professional murderers played.
Yeah.
They are murdering grubs.
Yeah, that's it.
Why should they be believed?
Yeah, that's it.
But today that argument's not there because everything's videoed.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I was in the United States actually. I was doing a research trip over there, and some of these American services, because we've got this idea that they're the top of the pops and that they're the ones getting. No way, mate. Some of these services are years behind the police. Like the Maui police service weren't even taping stuff, mate. These guys were whipping out notebooks and it was writing stuff like that. And it was on the front page of the paper when I was there that the first body worn camera, but it wasn't just cameras. Like they'd never recorded. They didn't have tape recorders. They didn't have anything. It was like a massive thing. And it was really funny because I'd be sitting there at the pub when I was catching up with some of the coppers and in the meal rooms because I did a few drive rounds with them, and be like, oh, geez, I don't know how this is going to go. And I went, I was genuinely astounded. I felt like I was back in 1991 when we started just recording because, we had to buy our own recorders,
Yeah, well, mate, the reality is there's 17,000 plus police forces in America. What we call a 1 or 2 officer station is the local sheriff and the sheriff and the deputy. A lot of those people are very poorly educated.
Yeah.
Their education in policing is provided by private providers, and they get their education, then move up a ladder, then they'll apply at another police department and work their way up. Nothing like what you see on TV, ladies and gentlemen. It is nothing like that.
No.
And people should be, that was going to come out wrong. I want to remind people what a professional police service all around Australia we've got working for me. I'm not a copper. I'm a civilian now. As we have got professional ambulance people, professional fire people, nurses, medical people, we have got the highest level of professionalism I know about policing, and we are as good as any in the world. And I'm not just saying that, but we should appreciate it.
Mate, there's actually a couple of questions. There's a question that's come up, and Rob Maloney, great to see is my cousin there. Good to see you back, Rob. I'm going to ask that question, Rob, but before I do, I just want to make the point too, like from my understanding, and again, I did come in late. The commissioner was actually still being tried when I was at the academy, and I went to the trial actually, and I saw him sitting there in the dock. But not everything that came out of Fitzgerald was bad. There was that massive pay rise, and it appears to me
that didn't come out of Fitzgerald.
Oh, that was you. That was
not
you.
Me. It was me and the union, and we showed it was what they called a work value case. We showed to the court the value of what police did day to day. Yeah. I just wanted to make that clear. Yeah.
Okay. Conceded. But I think it resulted in somewhat of a professionalisation because I think what happened is the authorities looked at it and going, mate, we don't pay these guys. We don't give them equipment. We don't give them powers. And still they're kind of making it work because a copper's greatest strength is our greatest weakness. If you give a cop a toothbrush and say, go and clean that street, he or she is going to whine like hell and write letters to the Union Journal and complain and, get his wife to write letters to the, get his wife to write letters to the local newspaper, but he'll go out and he'll sweep that street and it'll probably go okay. Now, the fact that we make ends meet and get around things is a great thing because we make the system work, but it's also a bad thing. So if you've got a shoddy B-grade system and, the people responsible for creating the system, they can kind of look at it and go, man, it's working. You know what I mean? But the system isn't working.
At the risk of being a bit not improper, whatever it is, the increase in equipment, a direct result of agitation, negotiation by the union, increasing working conditions, exactly the same. I'm not saying the union was the one who did everything. When we got a commissioner called Jim O'Sullivan, it was fantastic. Then Bob Atkinson. The whole place has evolved from the Fitzgerald era. Noel Newman was the commissioner. I don't resolve from the fact by saying I don't regard him as a good commissioner at all, and that's being charitable. I didn't agree with everything Jim O'Sullivan did. He and I had some great arguments, very vocal arguments. Same with Bob Atkinson until I finished as the union. I finished the union president before Bob Atkinson. I worked under Bob Atkinson, and Bob and I have been mates for 100 years. I worked under him in Cairns. We disagreed on things. And Bob and I are still good mates. We still have discussions where we agree or disagree. What I'm saying is the evolution of policing has continued unabated since Fitzgerald, and we've got the best quality. Like, I travel all around Australia in trucks, I go to race meetings, etc. Our policing, our practices are as good as anything in Australia and as good as anything in the world.
Yeah, and I'm kind of proud of that too.
Look, oh yeah.
There's a couple of I'm going to run through that question, but before I do, there's a whole pile of acknowledgements. Jason Steyer, Mel Gold, and Jen. Great to hear from you from the Territory. Jerry, fantastic to hear from you. Don Dunstan.
Donnie Dunstan.
Yep, mate.
Good bloke.
Sorry.
Good bloke.
Yep. Andrew Thompson.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, Pancake, you legend. Good to see you on there. And Jock O'Keefe. Jay Whitty, Topher, legend.
Yeah.
Madison Horton, my godson. Fantastic to see you on here. And Amanda Schultz, Trevor Crawford, Craw. And mate, he's told an awesome story here. Craw, that's actually visible to everyone. And so I suggest to everyone that I have a quick read of Trevor's thing on there rather than me kind of reading it out.
Trevor's contribution was significant, mate.
Sorry?
Trevor's contribution was significant at the inquiry.
Yeah, he's a good man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like he's actually now my boss, and I'm kind of.
Oh, righto.
I can't say I'm proud of that because it makes me sound sucky, but I am. Yeah, Shane Williams, good to see you on there as well. But
yeah.
Cousin has asked. He goes, "Look, are you in a position to comment about Hinds and other politicians' involvement with the coppers?"
Yep.
I would be interested to hear about Hinds and other politicians' involvement in the coppers because they seem to, I would be interested to hear about Hinds and other politicians' involvement in the corruption, obviously. He goes, the coppers seem to take all of the heat.
Yeah, look, it's difficult to look back at those times from today. We're 40 years down the road, more than that. 87, 34 years down the track. We're in a totally different society to what we were back then. The perfect example is if you drive through a country town at night, after about 7 o'clock, if the pub's open, it'll have one bar open with one light on and probably 2 cars parked outside. During these times, we're talking about when all these allegations were being made, you couldn't get down the street of country towns for the cars parked both sides of the street and everybody's in the pub. Now, every pub had an SP bookie. Every pub had an SP bookie. During the inquiry, the term containment and control was tossed around. Now, I wasn't a politician. I wasn't involved in politics. And as I said, I'm pretty neutral politically. In those times, the politicians did what they could get away with. No, the politicians governed in the manner that the society allowed or wanted them to govern. They didn't want strict control on having a bet. Let's remind people, all the things that caused the problems, SP betting, prostitution, and liquor licensing, have all been legalised and taken over by the government, and they make a fortune out of it. So, the hypocrisy of it is breathtaking. To answer the question as honestly as I can, the politicians allowed things to go along while it was politically expedient to them. The Conservative parties were in power for 32 years. When the Labor Party came to power with Wayne Goss, I believe Wayne Goss had a great government, probably because I worked with Terry McEnroth closely. Some things I can't talk about. Some things were funny, but some things were deadly serious that we had to get right for the future. And I was able to negotiate with that government to get the best I could for the police, to get the best I could for the mechanisms that were best going, that I could make a contribution that were best going to serve the people of Queensland. My phone's running out of battery.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, go on. Next question.
All right. Look, Rob, I hope that kind of answers your question. Mate, one of the Jason Steyer has asked, can you tell us about some of your bravery awards, including I know you feel funny about it. I mean, if you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to talk about it. Everyone will understand. But like if you could kind of talk about that and maybe apprehending that bank robbery.
The bloke was on TV.
Yeah,
that was interesting. I'll cut it there. There was a bloke. I won't mention his name. He's probably got family left.
Yeah, he does.
He was holding up banks, and his caper was he'd ring the bank manager and say, "I want to come and talk to you about some development finance." He'd make an appointment before the bank opened. So he'd turn up at the bank and say, "I've got to see Mr. Smith, the manager. My name's so and so." Yeah, good. And they allow him in. He'd get in the manager's office, open his briefcase, pull out a sawn-off 22. And these days he'd use zip ties, but in those days he had bits of nylon rope tied up. And he made the manager call the staff in one by one, but he made sure the vault was open. And he'd tie them all up. Then he'd get some money from the vault and away he'd go. Now, the Bankers Association was circulated. Everybody was circulated. We got some drum from a bank manager that a bloke had made an appointment at a bank at Ashgrove. I was on the periphery of this, but the bank substituted their staff with coppers. And they had coppers outside with a broken down car. They had a couple across the road, looked like they're having a domestic. There's coppers scattered all around the Ashgrove shopping centre. Old mate turns up. Instead of going to the bank that he had the appointment in, the bank across the road, the staff had opened the door to go in. So he followed them in and held that bank up. He come running out, raced down the road, everybody screaming and yelling. There was two telecom workers working in a pit. Remember they used to have those tents, they worked in the pit. And they said, "What's going on here?" He come running down, round the corner, jumped in a Chev Bel Air. A big thing, V8, and away he went. Yeah. They grabbed the number. Right, I cut to the chase. He abandoned that car, went to his house, abandoned that car, got another car. We had the description. I did. Yeah, I'll leave that part. We had a description of it. I was working with a fellow called Peter Phillips, and it had sort of come to a bit of an end, a bit of a stalemate. I said, "Bugger this, we're going back out to where he lives." We're heading back out and got to the Kenmore shopping centre, and this Chev drove past me. I said, "That's him." And he said, "Who?" I said, "That's him. That's old mate, the robber." Oh, shit. And Peter was an ex-pommy cop. I didn't like carrying a gun. So I had a gun. I put it on the arm of the seat beside me. I said, "If we got to use that, don't waste the bullets. I've only got 3," because it was a 5-shot. "I've only got 5 spares." I didn't know what I think we are going to do. Anyway, away we went. We're doing 80 mile an hour inbound on Moggle Road trying to stop this lunatic. He's firing shots at us. Peter picks up the radio and he uses a little bit of colourful language, which I won't repeat here. He's so-and-so shooting at us. He came down the hill. There's a marked police car, what was in the Western Freeway, although Jindalee Road, drove straight at the car and I screamed at him, "Get out of the way." They backed back and he went past. Long story short, he came up past inbound on Moggle Road, came up to a situation where there was a police car and a television cameraman called Nick Nicolaides, and Nick's filming. As it becomes relevant, as he comes up, he goes bang, bang, and fires 2 shots out the window at the copper and Nick Nicolaides, which is all caught on film. He turns left, and I'd sort of nearly crashed into another police car a bit further back, and I went round the big loop. He's coming up the road towards me. I'm across the bonnet of a police car with the big gun. As he goes past, he fires another shot at me. So I got a bit cranky and fired one back at him. And as it turns out, it hit the window surround above his head. As he's going up the road, I'm running up the road behind him. That shows how smart I am, which isn't very. And I'm firing shots at him. One blew out the back window and one hit the windscreen just beside his head. He dived down a side street, abandoned the car. We couldn't find him. Eventually, he was in a garden shed. Detective Sergeant George C., God may rest in peace, opened the door. I was standing 23 feet 4 inches away. I held on the door. I saw something in his eyes. As I told the coroner, I don't know what it was. I just saw something in his eyes. As George went to move away, this bloke fired a shot that went through the George's shirt under his armpit. George twisted away and fired a shot, and I fired at exactly the same time, and we both hit him and killed him. It wasn't pretty. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's not something I'm ashamed of either. I don't know what the emotion is. It's just something that had to be done. There was no choice at the time. We took the choice we had, and that was the consequence. It was sad someone had to lose his life, but he made the choices that led to it, not me.
Yeah, exactly. Mate, this has been absolutely fantastic and it's flying past. Hey, Tess, we asked that earlier. So for those who've come in late, you can kind of watch that at the beginning. But mate, something else, and I know we could keep on telling war stories because there's a number of other gallantry awards you've won, but that's the, I hope that answered your question well there, Sticks. Mate, tell me about the founding of Police Remembrance Day. And the wall-to-wall.
Right. Police Remembrance Day. I was when I was a young copper, when I was at Roma Street, I got sent down to the morgue because someone had to go a couple of weeks leave, and I was in the morgue. There was a plane crash on the 24th of September 1966, north of Winton, and 26 people were killed.
Yeah.
All the bodies came to Brisbane. I knew one of the people on the plane. I had to help with the postmortems and so forth. I hate planes because of that. I hate them. So I'm going to a police federation conference, which is all the police unions in Adelaide, with Col Chant and his wife and my then wife and myself. We're filled up at a place called Wilcannia, and we're heading across to Broken Hill. Everybody else in the car's asleep. And for my knockers who say about my driving, just listen to that. They were asleep, okay? And, there was no
I'm
code.
one of those knockers. I'm just saying. I've driven with you, O'Gorman.
There was no code 2. I'm driving across the desert to Broken Hill, and I was trying to remember the name of a police officer who died a couple of years before and was in a road accident, and I couldn't remember his name. And I was filthy, and I mean it. I was furious with myself. I was angry with myself. Cole woke up and I said, Cole, what was that bloke's name? He said, oh, so-and-so. Of course it was, yeah. Now, mate, I was so angry. When I got to the conference, the bloke who was the chairman, Peter Alexander, was the president of South Australia, he said to me, what's wrong? I said, nothing. He said, bullshit. He said, mate, I know you. He said, there's something bothering you. He said, come out here. Went outside and he said, are you okay? I said, well, mate, I'm doing it a bit tough. And he said, why, what's wrong? And I told him. And he said, what's wrong with that? And I said, mate, well, it's disgraceful that I couldn't remember the name of one of our people who fell 2 or 3 years ago. So I put the matter on the agenda for general business at the conference. We got it passed, and away it went. And that's how Police Remembrance Day started. 1987 was the first one in Queensland, keeping in mind the Fitzgerald Enquiry had just started. 11th of May 87 was the Moonlight State. 29th of September 87, the Feast of St. Michael, the patron saint of peacekeepers and police, was Remembrance Day. Believe me, it was uncomfortable. It's gone on since. Out of it has come a number of things. Each state's got a police memorial. Ours is in the western end of the old botanical gardens near Parliament House. Everybody should go and see it. It's a sacred place, and I mean that in a genuine term. Every state's got a memorial. Every year we have a ride for remembrance, a wall-to-wall ride. The wall-to-wall parties, we all ride from the wall in our state to the wall in Canberra. We ride our motorbikes. We meet up in Canberra on the Saturday. They have all the permits. They have all the stuff. And then we ride as one group. Last year, we had to have satellite rides in our own state because of COVID. The previous 2 years, there was somewhere like 3,000 motorcycles in Canberra to pay respect to fallen coppers. They're not all coppers. They're mates of coppers. There's a truckie mate of mine has done 8. I've done 10. Have I done 10 or not? 10 count last year. It is one of the most, that's my central, people talk about so many days to Christmas, so many days to my birthday. With me, so many days to the Police Remembrance Day. That's the centre of my year, and the wall-to-wall is with it.
And that's fantastic. And and we all appreciate it. And it's coppers do feel funny about their service. Like, I know some guys that are really proud of their service and don't like marching, but they really love doing those. They really love visiting the wall, and I know that do the wall-to-wall thing. So that's another magnificent contribution.
I can't understand, and I understand people got different views. I can't understand why you wouldn't want to march in your pride for what you've contributed. And I know we're all a bit reluctant to do that, but you want to march for the what people who contributed, who we've lost. But also, we want to march to tell the community this is the price that coppers pay looking after you, that we died. Some of us died.
Yeah.
And, you know, people aren't ashamed to go to Anzac Day and show their support for the ADF because they die looking after us.
Yeah.
Coppers do the same thing, only in a different way.
Yeah. To quote Rudyard Kipling, one of my favourite writers, making mocker uniforms that guard you while you sleep is cheaper than those uniforms, and they're starvation cheap.
One of the best sayings I like telling people, when there's something of horrible danger that you're running away from, we're running towards it.
Yeah, that's right.
Unhesitatingly, we run towards it.
So proud.
And we're proud of it.
Yeah. 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 When the chips are down, you don't want a social worker.
That's right.
You want someone strong to come and sort stuff out for you. But mate, look, we're overtime, and I'm loving this. I might actually get you on at another time in the future with a little bit of lighting.
Yeah.
Oh mate, and look, you know, it's been a great interview. That's just not a big deal. But we've ticked off on pretty much everything. So look, is there anything kind of quickly that you'd like to say just before I kind of wrap things up and go into the outro?
Not really, mate, but to any of the coppers who might see it, be proud of your service, be proud of what you've done. Don't be ashamed. No one's ashamed. People are just reluctant to say that they're proud. Don't be. Wear your service with pride. I always tell people that I'm proud to be part of that great group of Australians called coppers, because they are everything that stands between us and what would destroy our society.
Yeah. I got to admit, I used to kind of take things, and it was weird, like and I'd been in about 10 years, and I was having a discussion with a copper who was an East Timor veteran. And I kind of like was believing, because and I still do, I do a lot of reading of academic stuff. So I kind of like read all the criminology, and I read a lot of like really left-wing kind of stuff. And basically their thesis is, oh, look, you know, we live in a kind of peaceful society. It's human nature. It's the kind of way things are. Of course, after a few years in the police, you kind of, that's not exactly the way it is. But
if people want to think it's the way things are, who the hell is going to be there when someone butchers their family? Or who, you know, someone attacks a woman walking down the street for no reason other than they can? Who the hell is going to stop that? And who puts themselves in the danger to confront that evil? And that's the coppers. We put our hand up. We do it voluntarily. We're not conscripted. So no one forces us to do it, but by geez, we're good at it.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, it is a bit of, yeah. But it does make me proud. And this East Timor veteran, again, he's out of the police now, but he goes, mate, I've seen the breakdown of law and order.
Yeah, that's right.
Civilized, decent people do. When the chips are down, he goes, mate, without the thin blue line, he goes, it's real. It's really.
I'd like to say to the people who might watch this, next time you see a copper, the only time most people see a copper is when they get a ticket, and they got the shits about that, or their car gets stolen, or someone knocks their garden hose off, or whatever. But next time you see a copper, put your anger aside about getting a traffic ticket, because you did the wrong thing anyway. But I got one recently for going too quick in a truck, actually, in the speed camera. But anyway, next time you see a copper, go up and say, thanks. I understand a little of what you do, but thanks for what you do. It'll make the world of difference to their day.
Yeah. And look, while we're doing that, actually, as much as we do like to knock traffic branch, and we did all the normal traffic branch jokes.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly, and if there's any traffic branch, team members out there, you guys save more lives.
Oh, mate, I couldn't do traffic work. Everybody they talk to, either by their facial expressions, show that they resent the fact that they're there. Often they hurl abuse at them, treat the traffic coppers with contempt, and the traffic blokes just do their job in the hope that what they do might save some family from having to bury somebody or deal with a smashed up child or whatever else. And I haven't got the strength of character to bite me tongue when that sort of abuse is hurled at me That's why I never did traffic work, except for 10 days. I worked 10 days directing traffic at the exhibition.
And the stats are clear. Like,
Oh, yeah.
And an effective traffic branch in an area save lives. These stats are clear, again, because I'm geeky, and especially when I was relieving as OC of Smithfield and stuff like that, and when I was running my own station, like, you're responsible for it. So, you know, I'd be on my hands and knees to get traffic branch up there. And again, they save lives. The
stats are there. I remember years and years ago, the Courier Mail newspaper ran a campaign for road safety called Campaign 599. They wanted to get the annual road toll down to 599. Now it's in the low 200s, I think.
Yeah.
Somewhere around that. Who does that? It's better cars, it's better roads, it's better behaviour, but it's also better policing.
Damn right.
By the traffic coppers.
Yeah. So, you know, kudos to you, traffic guys. Like, you know, again, I loathed it. It's something I could never do.
Me either. Yeah.
You know, the work that those guys do is really, really important. So look,
but don't tell any of them I said that, for God's sake, will you?
No. I
No.
don't want anyone. Like, some of my best friends are truck. Yeah, like, you know, it's the skeleton in all of them.
Yeah.
But, you know, I wouldn't want anyone knowing that I like you, O'Gorman. Like, you know, that's kind of.
I'm going to deny it was me. I'm going to say it Buster. Yeah.
Well, one of my former inspectors said the only time I lie is when I'm under oath, and it's got to be a serious indictable offence. I won't reveal who that guy was. But look, I think we should wrap this up now.
Yep.
We've been going for a little bit over an hour and a half. There's a very good chance that I'll get you on again. There is considerable love on the Facebook page out there. So I don't think this will be the last time we talk. But a big thanks to everyone who's assisted. A big thanks to all the Facebook pages that have kind of helped with that. We've got is Kim O'Gorman is
my daughter.
Okay.
My little champion daughter.
Okay. Well, that's, you know, Kim, like and
how does Kim get on there?
I don't know, man, but like, she's on a social media marketing agency, so you make sure
that's right.
And say, tell her to get this interview out there. So I want to beat 3,000. So with her help, I'm sure we can make that happen. But a big thanks to everyone out there who's liked and shared. A big thanks to all the supporters of Northern Vibe. You guys know who you are. It's really serious. We started off on this nowhere podcast doing nothing, and now we're getting, like, our reach is over 20,000, and interviews, like, I'm getting interviews over 2,000. So it's absolutely incredible. And that's due to you. That's due to your liking and sharing, by the way, like and share, and following Northern Vibe. Thank you. I'm seriously humbled. I'm not being ironic or flippant. It means a lot to me. And I know anyone who's keen on getting Bluey's story out, again, make sure you share the absolute heck out of this. So next week's guest is Amber Gold. She's a sex worker. She wants to, she's going to come on and discuss the sex industry, how it affects people in it. She's a very intelligent, articulate lady. Her perspective is definitely going to be worth listening to. After that, the week I have a chap, Jeremy Bate, who's a detransitioner. So he's a former transsexual, as he likes to articulate it. That's pre-recorded, actually. I have to declare, unfortunately, it's not going to be completely live because he's not free on Mondays. But that interview, when I play that, believe me, that's going to be uber cool. So make sure you do like and follow Northern Vibe and stay with us and share these interviews. Bluey, we're going to wrap it up there, mate. I'll get you to stay on the line just for a second. But thank you very much to everybody out there.